Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is titled, People Don't Want Solutions, They Want Someone to Blame. One of the biggest problems in modern society is that people have become addicted to blame. Every few weeks there is a new public outrage, a new crisis dominating headlines, and a new explanation for why everyone claims to be miserable. Gas prices rise, food costs increase, rent goes up, politicians argue endlessly, and social media turns every issue into a national emergency. Then, just as quickly as the outrage appeared, people move on to the next thing to complain about. Nobody reflects on the previous outrage. Nobody admits they overreacted, and nobody gives credit when conditions improve. The cycle simply repeats itself over and over again because outrage has become entertainment. What many people fail to understand is that while economic problems are real, a large percentage of personal suffering comes from decisions individuals make themselves. That is the part nobody wants to discuss honestly because it requires accountability. It is much easier to point at politicians, corporations, celebrities, or the system than it is to admit years of poor choices, impulsive spending, lack of discipline, and refusal to prepare for the future. People often want a villain because blaming themselves is uncomfortable. Of course, inflation exists. Of course, food and gas prices matter. Nobody is denying that reality. But there is a major difference between struggling because times are difficult and struggling because someone spent years making reckless financial choices. Many people are buried in debt long before gas prices rise by $1. They finance vehicles they cannot afford, spend money trying to impress people who do not care about them, live entirely off credit, and constantly chase temporary pleasure instead of stability. Then, the moment the economy tightens, they act as though external conditions alone destroyed their lives. Meanwhile, there are countless people who made responsible decisions for years. They budgeted carefully, avoided unnecessary debt, worked consistently, and accepted temporary sacrifice in exchange for long-term security. Those people notice rising prices too, but their entire world does not collapse because they built their lives on a stronger foundation. They may not enjoy paying more for groceries or gas, but they are not emotionally shattered by it because they prepared themselves better. That difference matters, and society avoids talking about it because responsibility is unpopular. Social media has only made this mentality worse. People now spend hours every day consuming outrage, arguing with strangers, and attacking public figures they will never meet. Miserable people often search for someone to absorb their frustration, so politicians, celebrities, influencers, and random internet users become targets for endless anger. The internet rewards emotional reactions, victimhood, and outrage because those things generate attention. Calm, disciplined, responsible people rarely go viral. Chaos does. A person who hates their own life will often convince themselves that every external issue is the true source of their misery. They become obsessed with politics, online drama, and cultural arguments because it distracts them from confronting themselves. Deep down, many people know their problems did not begin with gas prices or elections. Their problems began years earlier through bad habits, poor decisions, laziness, lack of planning, addiction, or refusal to mature emotionally and financially. But admitting that would require change, and change is difficult. Modern culture also pushes the dangerous idea that ordinary work is somehow embarrassing. Many people would rather chase internet fame, online validation, or viral attention than live a stable and peaceful life. Honest jobs are mocked while internet clowns are celebrated. Some individuals genuinely believe humiliating themselves online for views and money is a better life than quietly working a normal job and maintaining dignity. That mentality says a lot about society's priorities. The truth is that there is more dignity in an ordinary worker living within their means than there is in someone destroying themselves publicly for attention. A person working a simple job, paying their bills, supporting themselves honestly, and living a relatively peaceful life is not a failure. In many cases, they are mentally healthier and emotionally stronger than people constantly seeking online validation. Yet, modern culture often reverses those values and teaches people to worship fame regardless of how destructive or degrading it becomes. There are also many people who have become disconnected from what real hardship actually looks like. Minor inconvenience feels catastrophic because they have never experienced genuine instability or serious struggle. Some people complain endlessly about work while failing to realize how much worse life can become without structure, income, or responsibility. Stability is often underappreciated until it disappears. At some point, society has to stop pretending that every personal failure can be blamed on politics, economics, or social conditions alone. Governments influence the economy, and leadership matters. But no politician can fix years of destructive personal behavior. No president can force someone to budget wisely, avoid debt, develop discipline, or make responsible long-term decisions. Those are individual responsibilities. People have far more control over their daily habits, spending choices, priorities, and mindset than they do over national politics. Yet many obsess over things they cannot control while completely neglecting the areas where they actually have power. That is part of why so many people remain trapped in cycles of anger and dissatisfaction. They wait for external rescue instead of improving themselves. The uncomfortable truth is that many people are not primarily suffering because the world failed them. Many are suffering because they failed themselves repeatedly and never corrected course. That does not mean life is fair or easy, but personal responsibility still matters. Until more people accept that reality, society will continue spiraling through endless outrage, blame, distraction, and emotional instability while avoiding the deeper causes of its problems. This concludes this episode of the Moores October Rants. Thank you for listening. Signing out. Goodbye for now.